You know, the teenage years are just this incredible time of transformation. Our brains are growing and changing faster than at almost any other point in our lives. But that rapid growth also makes it a time of real vulnerability, especially when substances get into the mix. So today, we're going to get into exactly how drugs and alcohol can actually reshape the teen brain, and how those effects can stick around for a lifetime.
Okay, let's just dive right in with a big one. It's a question a lot of people have. We hear it all the time, right? That marijuana is a soft drug, it's natural, you can't really get addicted. It's a super common belief, and it's getting more common as it becomes more available.
Well, here's the thing. When you push aside the opinions and actually look at the science, a much more complicated and, honestly, a more concerning picture starts to form. This idea that cannabis is totally harmless, especially for young people, it's a huge misconception.
And this slide really brings that reality into sharp focus. A big national study just last year found that teens who were hospitalized and had a clinical diagnosis of cannabis use disorder were almost 2.5 times more likely to have attempted suicide or hurt themselves. I mean, let that sink in. This isn't some minor risk. It's a huge red flag showing the deep distress that's tied to addiction in teens.
So why? Why are teens hit so hard by this? Well, it all comes down to one simple fact. Their brain is literally a construction zone. It's a work in progress. Let's take a look at what that really means.
I really love this analogy. See, an adult brain isn't just a bigger teen brain. During adolescence, the brain is actively being sculpted and refined. It's getting rid of neural connections it doesn't need, kind of like pruning a tree, and it's strengthening the important pathways for things like good judgment and emotional control. It's this super delicate and absolutely crucial process.
And this chart just lays it out perfectly. The parts of a teen's brain that scream for reward and pleasure, they're firing on all cylinders. Everything feels new and exciting. But at the same time, the prefrontal cortex, which is like the brain CEO, the part in charge of impulse control and thinking about consequences, it's still in training. So you've got this imbalance that basically wires teens to seek out risks without having the fully developed brakes to slow themselves down.
Okay, so with that imbalance in mind, let's talk about cannabis. How does THC, its main active ingredient, mess with this delicate brain-building project?
The main character in this story is something called the endocannabinoid system, or ECS. Now, this is your body's own natural cannabis-like system. And during the teen years, it's basically the foreman of the construction site. It tells brain cells where to go and what to do. So when you introduce THC from the outside, you're essentially hijacking the entire construction crew and messing with the blueprints.
And this gets us to what happens in that prefrontal cortex, the CEO's office. Think of your brain as having a gas pedal and a brake pedal. THC messes with the GABA system, which is the brain's main brake. Research shows that in a developing brain, THC can basically cut the brake lines. And without those brakes, the dopamine system, the gas pedal for reward and feeling good, just goes into overdrive. It's like flooring a car with no way to slow it down. And that creates an imbalance that can mess with motivation and mental health for a long time.
Now let's switch gears to another really common substance, alcohol. If THC is like a hijacker rewriting the plans, you can think of alcohol as a neurotoxin. It's basically a poison to the developing brain. Neurotoxic is a strong word, I know, but the science really backs it up. Alcohol use in teens directly damages the brain's physical structure. It speeds up the loss of gray matter. Think of that as the brain's computers. And it slows down the growth of white matter, which is like the network cables connecting all those computers. When you damage both, you end up with less processing power and slower communication across the whole brain.
And this chart, it explains so much about why teens are more likely to binge drink. Biologically, they are more sensitive to the fun parts of alcohol, like feeling more social and outgoing. But at the same time, they're less sensitive to the negative stuff that tells an adult, hey, maybe you should stop. Feeling sleepy or clumsy or worrying about the hangover tomorrow. Their brains are basically getting all the green lights to keep going and very few of the red lights.
And here's the really scary part. These disruptions aren't just temporary. They can set the stage for serious, lasting problems that can follow a person for the rest of their lives.
This is a deeply concerning finding from recent research. The link between heavy cannabis use in teens and psychosis, that's a severe mental state where you lose touch with reality, is really strong. And look at this quote. The risk can be elevated after just 5 uses. That suggests it might be seriously interfering with that brain pruning process we talked about, potentially opening the door to devastating disorders like schizophrenia. And the risk isn't just about psychosis. As you can see right here, early substance use is tied to a much higher risk for a whole range of serious mental health issues. The data shows clear connections to things like major depression and anxiety disorders. You see, by changing how the brain's circuits for emotion and stress get built, early substance use can leave a young person more vulnerable to these conditions for years and years.
The consequences are just so widespread. We're talking about real, lasting scars on a person's ability to think and to feel. This can show up as trouble concentrating in school, problems with memory, or a constant struggle to just manage your own emotions. The big takeaway here is that this isn't just about what happens when someone is high. It's about changing the very foundation of who they're going to be as an adult.
So how does it happen? How does a teen go from just trying something to developing a full-blown addiction? Well, it turns out there's a pretty clear pathway that we need to understand.
First, let's be clear on what we're talking about. The clinical term for addiction is cannabis use disorder, or CUD. This isn't about someone who uses it once in a while. This is a recognized medical condition where a person keeps using even though it's causing real, measurable damage to their health, their schoolwork, and their relationships. Now, not everyone who uses cannabis gets addicted, but the risk is absolutely real, especially for people who use it a lot. Studies show that somewhere between 9 and 20% of daily users will develop a dependence, and for a teenager whose brain is already primed to form habits, that risk is even higher.
And this progression here, it makes perfect sense. It all starts with using early and often. Then the brain adapts. It builds up a tolerance, which means you need more and more to get the same feeling. Pretty soon the brain starts to rely on the substance just to feel normal. That's dependence. And then when you try to stop, the brain kind of freaks out and you get hit with the awful experience of withdrawal.
And let's be crystal clear, cannabis withdrawal is not something someone is just making up. It is a real, miserable, physical, and psychological experience. We're talking intense anxiety, irritability, you can't sleep, you feel depressed, you can't eat. And this is often the moment where addiction really digs its claws in, because using again feels like the only way to get relief. This is not a failure of willpower. It's a serious medical condition that needs support to overcome. And that's precisely why organizations like RecoveryCNT exist, to provide real, professional help for teens and their families who are going down this incredibly tough road. And that brings us to our last and most important point. This window of brain development in adolescence, it doesn't last forever. It is a finite, precious opportunity to build the foundation for a healthy and happy adult life. Protecting that future is one of the most important things we can possibly do. So if you or a young person you know is struggling, please, please know you are not alone and that there is real, compassionate help out there. Don't wait. Reach out to the professionals who know how to help. You can contact RecoveryCNT at 1-732-484-9661 or find them online at recoverycnt.com to get the help you deserve. Thank you so much for your time.